All right. What is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, Coach J.K. McLeod, and we're kicking off a fitness, nutrition, wellness, all that jazz focused episode today, which is typically what we do on Tuesdays here on the Help Me Understand podcast. And by we, I mean me. But let's also say we, because if you're listening, you're part of the crew too. And by the way, if you are listening, I want to say thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. I know that you have plenty of other podcast content that you can and possibly do also consume along with Help Me Understand. So I just appreciate that you were willing to give this particular podcast. Maybe it's just been this episode or you've listened to other ones. Either way, truly appreciate you being here with me today. All right, so let's get into today's episode. What I've got here is I took, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, four, not necessarily just questions, but 4 posts that I responded to in some way, shape, or form on the Threads app. And they're all pretty much fitness related. And I wanted to take some time to provide some more context and some more nuance into each of these particular topics, posts / questions. So let's go ahead and get into it. And they are in no particular order. In fact, I'm going to start with the one that I have on the bottom of my page. I just basically copy pasted the posts and put them into a Google Doc so I could see them on my screen. So I'm actually going to take the last one and then we'll either go from last one to the first or we'll kind of hop around because one of them is more specific to just some thoughts that I have for other coaches who are also responsible or hold themselves responsible to creating content. So I've got something I want to share on that. The other stuff is going to be more focused on hopefully what will be helpful information. So let's get into the first one. So on this first one, somebody posted, I'll read it verbatim on this particular one. They said, I've consumed daily caffeine for over 20 years, the exception being first trimester nausea. I get a second wind at night and stay up too late so I can have time to myself, but the early mornings don't change. Operating under, or actually, hold on, let me back up. That was part 2 of the post. All right, so redo here without restarting the episode. All right, here was the beginning of the post. I'm attempting to cut caffeine for 7 days. I'm a single mom of 2 with a full-time professional career and a triathlete. This is basically insane, right? Someone tell me I won't die. And then in part 2 of the post, she says, I have consumed daily caffeine for over 20 years, the exception being first trimester nausea. I get a second wind at night and stay up too late so I can have time to myself, but the early mornings don't change. Operating on under 6 hours per night on average is terribly unhealthy, especially with my output with training. I figured this will get me to bed better than sheer willpower, a 7-day experiment, if you will. So I commented asking why the cut, so the reason for cutting caffeine in this particular instance, and her response was mainly, I sleep about 6 hours on average, and my second wind at night is the culprit, and it keeps me from sleeping long enough. So I figure this will send me to bed at an appropriate time, maybe. I am strictly a one, and then parentheses, one very strong morning coffee drinker, so it's not a timing issue. My response was there's a couple of areas I'd recommend also digging into along with what she's shared so far. So let's kind of recap this, and then I'll share what my response is and also provide some additional information, additional opinion here on what I'd recommend someone would dig into if you find this particular question to be at all relatable. So to recap, someone is going to be cutting caffeine for the next 7 days, basically as an experiment to see if that possibly helps with their sleep. What they've identified as the problem with their sleep is that they're operating on under 6 hours per night. So there's a belief there that that's terribly unhealthy. And I'm utilizing that specific verbiage because that's what the poster put. So it's terribly unhealthy. So they want to get more than 6 hours of sleep per night. They've also recognized that they get, or they said under 6 hours is their average. They've also recognized that they get a second wind later on in the evening. And it also is that's time that they really, about the only time it seems like that they feel like they get to themselves outside, possibly outside of training. Because one thing they didn't mention is if they're having to balance, trying to do workouts with also having two kids around. So they mentioned they were also a single mom of the two kids and a full-time career and also a triathlete. So what I recommended was a couple of other areas to also dig into. And this is pretty standard for how I will generally approach blanket advice like I'm giving here in this instance with somebody who I'm not working directly with. I have limited to hardly any information on their past history, their background, or anything like that, just based on the information that they have shared so far. What I recommend is one, take into account how much caffeine is in that particular cup of coffee that they're consuming and how many hours they're consuming that particular cup of coffee before bed. In this post, the individual mentions that they strictly have one very strong cup of coffee in the morning, and then also mention that it's not a timing issue. Why I bring up the recommendation of digging into how much caffeine is in that particular cup of coffee is because, well, one, they mentioned, like specifically mentioned in parentheses, very strong. So one cup of coffee doesn't provide any sort of specificity when it comes to how much caffeine is in said cup of coffee. I'll use the example of myself, who typically uses a pre-workout in the morning before specifically my lifting workouts. I can say I have a scoop of pre-workout before I go to the gym, and then that's pretty much the majority of the caffeine intake that I have for the rest of the day. Now, you hear that, and it's up to you to then decide if you care. You are going to create your own story about how much caffeine is in that one scoop of pre-workout. Here's the deal, though. I have taken pre-workout where one scoop can be as little as 50 milligrams as caffeine and as much as 400 in one scoop. You have different size scoops, and you also have pre-workouts that vary wildly in the content of how much caffeine is in that one particular scoop. This is very similar to when I'm talking to someone and trying to get an understanding of what their alcohol habits are. And very commonly, somebody will use the phrase, well, I just have a glass of wine before bed. It's just a glass. Well, if you don't have experience as a coach in trying to get a better understanding of what that actually means, then you may assume that one glass of wine is a small glass of wine, like maybe 6 to 8 ounces, let's say. I don't consume alcohol anymore, so I'm really like disconnected from like what's considered a lot and a little and that sort of a thing. However, what I do know, just as a basic everyday thing, is that not all glasses are created the same, and also that not all people react to that quote unquote one glass of wine the same. So just as you've got the example of just a glass of wine, me saying a scoop of pre-workout, it's just like saying a bowl of cereal. I'll tell you, if I say like, yeah, I just had just a bowl of cereal, that doesn't tell you the content of said cereal, doesn't tell you what type of cereal, definitely doesn't tell you how big the bowl was, because I can make myself a really large bowl of cereal. So going back to the assumption that if it's just a cup of coffee, that the timing isn't the issue, I think respectfully, it's a miscalculation in whether or not that is an important factor in this. So there's something within the, we'll call it the nutrition space, called half-life. And what a half-life is, generally, that term is used when we're talking about how much time it takes for your body to digest and work its way through the effects of whatever you have taken in. And when it comes to the consumption of caffeine, it can just generally, it can be up to 8 to 9 hours for some folks before the effects of that particular caffeine intake have even gone down to like half of what it was. So let's say that you drank a pre-workout that had 300 milligrams of caffeine. If it takes your body about 8 hours to digest that, based on half-life, then you still have, what did I say, 300? So you've got maybe about 150 milligrams that are still sitting there after that time frame. So just something to really think about. That's why one of the points that I made in this particular response is take into account how much caffeine is in that particular cup of coffee that you're consuming and about how many hours it is before bed. So one of the things that I would recommend if I were working with this individual specifically would be perhaps a smaller dose of whatever is going on with that particular cup of coffee. So say if it's like a massive cup of like a big mug of coffee, we perhaps would look at reducing the size of that because, spoiler alert, my recommend generally, especially as someone who's training for a tough event like a triathlon, I believe that she mentioned, and also responsible for overseeing the well-being of two children. She didn't say small, but I don't think, but two children, and also holding down a career. I wouldn't recommend just generally going cold turkey on caffeine. And also, I respect the choices that different people make. Just for myself, who's offering an unsolicited opinion here, that I would start first with, okay, can we play around with how much you're consuming from a standpoint of still supporting the functions that you need in order to get through the day. The other thing that I commented on this particular one was asking, what does your food and drink consumption look like usually 6 hours before and up to when you get in bed? So with things like disrupted or poor sleep, and in terms of this particular question, we're identifying poor sleep as getting less than 6 hours on average, then I would ask, the reason I'm asking about food and drink consumption is because I think that it can be really easy to assume that caffeine is the primary culprit, so to speak, in why we're staying up later. And maybe, in fact, it's not. Especially because as somebody who prides themselves and really believes strongly in things fitting into your overall lifestyle or the lifestyle that you hope to have, when someone has a day where they are the primary caregiver for two children and also working and also training for a triathlon, then I also think that I think there's not like competing goals isn't the word and isn't the phrase in this particular instance. What I see here possibly, like, I feel like I'm diagnosing, what I see here possibly is a bit of a conflict with, yeah, I need to get to bed earlier, and also, man, I just really enjoy having that alone time to myself to just chill and relax. And, maybe this falls under the self-care umbrella. So I would also be asking some questions about what sorts of activities are happening as you do stay up later when you get that second wind. So is it staying up later, and then also we're maybe consuming other things that are contributing to the poor sleep versus it's the caffeine in the morning. So if staying up late, I had this conversation with a client not that long ago where they were trying to really get a better handle on their sleep, because we have those three foundational habits: eat well, sleep enough and exercise regularly. So eat well, sleep enough, exercise regularly. And what she was talking about was the sleep enough and feeling like that was affected. And also what was at conflict with that is that her and her partner really, really, really valued their ability to spend time together after the kids had gone to bed at night. So this, with the way that I typically will work with people through scenarios that build those three foundations of eat well, sleep enough, and exercise regularly, I'm very, very hesitant to say like, man, well, that's just too bad. You're gonna have to call it a night, and you're not going to spend any time with somebody that you care about. Like that's just not my vibe, because I think at the end of the day, your habits should fit the lifestyle that you desire and the things that are important to you. And last one on this, I had another client, a very similar thing. They made a really, really solid observation where they were talking about, as their kids were getting older, one of their kids had reached driving age. And so that built-in time that you're spending with your child who can't drive at the moment, so the shuttling them back and forth to different appointments and different events and friends' houses and all that other stuff, as, for lack of a better way to put it, like as sometimes annoying as you might think that could be, as your kids, or I will say this for myself, as my kids have gotten closer to the age where, like, now we have a 20-year-old who's now out of the house and in college, and then we have a 13-year-old. Something that I've noticed with both of them is that as that time frame, the times that you spend with them in the car, whether it's a whole lot of interaction or not, you start to become just more aware, more cognizant of like, oh man, this is not something that's going to last for much longer. With having a 20-year-old, she's like up and gone, and then a 13-year-old who, Lord willing, in a few years will then be driving himself to different things and practices and games and friends' houses and all that stuff. You begin to realize that those built-in times where it's almost like you got to be in here with me, like you don't have a choice to just like be out. Those are few and far between. So you start to really appreciate those random times where it's like, okay, well, they get home from practice at 9 p.m. and you can spend some time, like, so you stay up a little bit later so you can spend some time. And that's what one of my clients had pointed out, where she was like, I've got one kid that's like, she's driving age now, so that stuff isn't built in. So instead of going to bed at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, sometimes I do stay up a little bit later, because even that 20 minutes or so when she comes back in from a practice or gets off of her job and comes back home, that 20-ish minutes when she comes in and dumps all of her stuff down on the couch and just like lays down for a few minutes on the couch and is just kind of chilling out. Like, I like to be around for that, because it's the times for me to do that are few and far between. So that can be at conflict with also this very rigid, well, I've got to be in bed by this specific time. So that's what I wanted to share with that. So overall, just to recap this particular one, when it comes to, if you feel like, so if, take this question and basically kind of put a mirror on it. If you believe that you've got an issue with caffeine intake, or an issue with sleep, and you are looking at your caffeine intake, I would recommend, instead of immediately thinking like, let me go on a complete just detox from it, then perhaps you can start in a couple of other places, especially when you take into account that it could potentially be helpful with making sure that you're awake and alert for other areas that you're responsible for. Okay, let's see here. This one, yeah, there's a second one here. This one will probably be much more efficient. The poster said, I'm an avid gym goer. There's this gym in town I always drive by, but it doesn't look like a traditional gym. I found out it's a CrossFit gym. I have no clue about CrossFit. Is it worth it? And I didn't copy paste my answer to this one so that I could remember exactly what I said. However, here's my answer to that. One is, if at all possible, and this is specific to someone who has observed that there's a CrossFit box, and that's what CrossFit gyms are called. Affiliates are called boxes. So they see that it's a CrossFit box. They have no clue what it is, and then asking like, hey, is it worth it? And one, you're going to get a whole lot of different answers because there's a whole lot of variation when it comes to CrossFit at this point. And that's something that I think can be both a gift and also a immense sort of frustration, because it's not necessarily, I mean, it's definitely not always going to be the same. Boxes program very, very differently. And there's a particular kind of structure generally to many CrossFit classes that you'll see, which is typically some sort of a warm up that is focused on mobility and getting an understanding of really just generally preparing, or not even generally, preparing your body for the specific workout that you're going to have that day. So, for example, if the workout that day is going to include a strength piece, and that strength is going to be, let's say, back squats, the barbell back squat, and then there's probably going to be a Metcon, so more of a higher intensity conditioning or cardio type piece that also will have weight to it, if that's going to be a part of it. What you will typically find is that the warm-up is going to be heavily focused on body parts that are going to be, or muscle groups, I guess I should say, that are going to be used in specifically the strength portion of that particular program that day. And then if a box is really on top of it, then they will also have some mobility pieces that are focused on the Metcon. So let's call it like the cardio or the conditioning portion that will follow the strength workout. So you will typically have a really solid warm up. I would say on average, you're maybe talking like 10-ish minutes or less, around somewhere around there, like the 6 to 10 minute range when it comes to like your warm up and mobility. Then there's typically a strength piece where you have one specific movement that you're really going hard in the paint on from a strength, like getting stronger standpoint. Typically that's going to be something that will either be a squat. So whether it's a back squat where the barbell is on your back, or a front squat where you've got it racked in a front rack position. It could be a strict press, or it could be a deadlift, or it could be some sort of an Olympic lifting movement like a snatch or a clean. I'm probably forgetting something. However, those from my experience, so I'm going to put this out there that I'm speaking specifically from my overall experience, that generally a strength portion in a CrossFit workout is going to focus on one of those. Let's see, I said, were those 5 movements? Squat, deadlift, strict press, snatch, clean. So some variation probably of those 5 movements. You will have, I've noticed in looking at programming at multiple boxes just over the years, there's been an incorporation more of bench press in some boxes, more than I believe there was, let's say, like before 2020, let's say, just on average. Just notice that that's starting to make its way in there somewhat. So you'll have a big strength piece, and then you will typically have a super fast, so like push it, like let's go with the speed here, Metcon, that will then be usually, I mean, it just kind of depends, but if there's a strength piece, then usually your Metcon is typically going to be somewhere in the, let's call it 10 to 12 minute range. And that may not sound like a whole lot. However, if you've done CrossFit, even if you've been at one workout, or if you've been doing it for a number of years, you know, like, do not underestimate what limits your body can be pushed to in a 8 to 12-ish minute time frame. And then there typically is going to be a few minutes available near the end of that particular session for a cool down, and really just kind of bring everything back down before you are done and gone for the day. So what I would recommend, so basically what I did there is just gave my perspective on what generally you would expect when it comes to just a general CrossFit workout that's programmed. Now, Where the variation can come is you can drop into a box and they can be going through a particular strength cycle with a particular movement. So they may be focusing specifically on like working up to your max, let's say a 3-rep max for a deadlift. So that programming will look different from week to week to week. You may have boxes like right now, boxes at the time that this is recording and released, it's near the end of February. So you have boxes that may be really, really focused on prep for the CrossFit Open, which is basically it's a few weeks period where all CrossFit boxes across the country once a week are doing the same workout I'm kind of disconnected with things now, but I believe it's 3 weeks. I know at some point I think it was up to 5 or 6 weeks. Somebody can correct me on that. But anyways, I say that to say, if you go in when a box is doing open prep, then you may notice that there's not as much of the class period that's taken with a strength piece, and it's more on like chipper type workouts where it's like, 50 burpees, then 40 calories row, then 30 wall balls, and 20, like kind of like that sort of methodology. It just really depends. And then you have some boxes where they've really started to incorporate more of like bodybuilding type principles. So they may decide that a particular day is more of a bodybuilding day. I say all that to say programming can be so different. So my strong recommendation, and I put this in the comments for this person, and also I would say the same thing for anybody who's listening to this. If you're not sure what it's all about, strong recommend drop into the box and try to speak with the owner and or the head coach. Those are typically going to be your best people to speak with. And in many of the boxes, like the owner is many times the head coach, or sometimes like a lot of times you'll find that it's a husband and wife couple that will own the boxes. And it's not uncommon at all to drop in, around like middle of the day ish, and you'll just see a couple of folks that are there. I wouldn't necessarily recommend, if you're going to drop in, like dropping in at 5 or 6 a.m. or at noon or at 5 p.m. specifically, not because nobody will be there, but because those typically tend to be times where if you drop in, you might walk in while they're in the middle of a class and super busy. So if at all possible, I'd recommend like try to contact your box through email or through social media, or dropping in to say like, hey, is there a time where I can pop in and just get an understanding of what your programming looks like? And many of them will typically offer either a strongly reduced fee for the first class, or you just pay a certain fee and you get a t-shirt and get to attend the class, or many of them will do an intro class for free. I'm certainly not speaking for all, just again, in my experience in having visited a lot. I can't even count how many boxes I've visited across the country at this point over the past, when did I first go to CrossFit? 2013, I think. So over the past 13 years. So that's what I would recommend. Again, you can ask this question to 10 different people and you're going to get 13 different answers on what to expect. So even the old school argument of stereotyping, like, I wouldn't really recommend that because it's going to be too much volume and there's no focus on instruction and it's just too many people in one class. I got to tell you that I have not found that to be a blanket statement that applies, because many CrossFit affiliates that, at least that I'm aware of, the ones that I'm aware of, have really taken to heart and really understood sometimes what that public perception can be. And they program, the programming is just very different from one box to another. Sometimes you can hop onto the websites and be able to see what their programming has looked like. If you are going to do that, I recommend that you look at a couple of weeks in a row versus I popped on and I looked at their Tuesday workout, and that Tuesday workout tells me the type of training that they do. That I think is a miscalculation. And I would actually say that for just about any sort of group exercise, for the most part, and I'm not talking, when I say group exercise, I'm not talking like for example, like a Les Mills, where it's a very specific like program that gets followed and the choreography and all that stuff. And so you know exactly what that's going to be because the workout looks the same every time for the quarter or however long they program for before they switch things out. I'm talking like anything other than that. I would look at the programming throughout an entire week, if at all possible. See if you can get a look at 2 weeks of programming because you start to get an understanding for what that flow is. It is not uncommon at all for a group exercise facility to have certain days that they do certain things. Like even the program that I put together for the gym, or it's one of the programs that the gym offers. I put together a program called FitWad, which, side note, that program, if you're interested, hit me up because that's going to be available in the next couple of months to the general public, by the way, too. But the program that I put together, we have 1, 2, 3 full body lifting days available. And then we have 2, 3 optional like cardio conditioning days. So if you were to just look at the Friday workout for the FitWad program that I put together, you would think, oh, okay, so this is like metabolic conditioning, cardio, that's what this program is all about. But then if you were to look at the Thursday workout, you would see more of like a mixture of bodybuilding, strength, and a little bit of cardio there, which would look different than Mondays, which is primarily all lifting. So I say all that just to say, if you are looking, whether it's CrossFit or any type of group exercise, see if you can get a look at the programming for at least a week, preferably 2. Not just for a particular day. All right, we got a couple more here. Let's see, second to last one. Somebody posted, so people said the preferred method for strength training is to not eat before I train, and I strongly disagreed. So I decided to try it out for this leg day. We'll see how it goes. So the piece I wanted to bring up here is so the overall vibe here would be like, hey, this is going back to the argument about working out fasted, whether we're talking fasted cardio, or in this case, what really caught my eye is that the poster said, so people were talking about the preferred method for strength training. I found that one to be really, really interesting because the argument with like fasted cardio generally that I've seen and that's come my way has been rooted in, well, if you're going into the workout without any food or anything in your system, then when you do the cardio, your fat cells are what are going to be utilized for energy because you don't have other sources of energy in your system. So you don't have dietary fat and you don't have carbohydrates. You just can only pull from either body fat or muscle. So the argument that's been presented to me is that fasted cardio is preferred because in order for your body to be able to do that particular level of exercise, the energy system that it's going to pull from, or the thing that it's going to pull from, is going to be your body fat. So what I don't want to do is get into an argument on this particular one as far as like, should you or shouldn't you do fasted cardio? If I have to pick a side, I'm of the camp that will say that one is not superior, more or less superior than the other. So go ahead and do it based on preference. I would say that myself and my bias, the preference and my bias, is to do whatever allows me to feel fueled for the activity that I'm going to do. So if I'm going to do cardio, let's say that I'm going to do 30 minutes of interval cardio, whether that be runs or rowing or using the bike or elliptical or ski erg or some combination of those things. If I'm going to do 30 minutes of intervals, then I want to make sure that I'm at least fueled to give that session as much energy as I possibly can versus going in feeling depleted and not energetic, because then I don't believe that I'm actually going to put forth the best effort that I can to get out of said session. Hopefully that makes some sense. In this particular instance, what the person was talking about was the preferred method of strength training. And fortunately, it was cool because they actually sent me, or they reposted some screenshots of other folks who had recommended this, because I think my response on this, so when she said, so people said the preferred method is blah blah blah, I was like, wait, I got questions. Who is people? Because I definitely got questions. And so she sent or posted the screenshots, and it's pretty much what I had assumed would be the basis for the responses. So there were some folks that were talking about, at the end of the day, actually, let me, this is not going to make for good, not good TV, but good podcasting, but bear with me for a minute. I'm going to see if I can try to find the specific that was given, because I thought it was actually pretty good. Bear with me for like just a minute here. Yeah, my response was, bear with me here for a minute, folks. Actually, yeah, I said, who is people? Because I have questions. And okay, one of the responses that was given from one of the individuals who recommend it, they said, this is actually the preferred way to work out if I'm keeping it a buck, which, I mean, all respect to that. And then another person said, I'm going to be real, science-based, education-based, and results-based training are all different. Goals are a determining factor. Calorie limits, type of exercise, etc., all come into play. The preferred way references a general rule of thumb among lifters. This way is a lot more common than you may realizing. Eating too much or before a workout causes sluggishness and fatigue because the body is still breaking down the food while working out. Textbook knowledge is cool, but understand the differences. And I really respect this particular answer because, one, the person took the time to actually like share where they were coming from. Here's what I would say, and I'm attempting to do this from the standpoint of not, and this will actually relate to the last point, not making it all about like that specific person and them. So that's why I'm not even sharing like their screen name or their username or anything like that. However, if you're on Threads and you know how to basically use Threads, you can like basically find like things that I reply to and whatnot. However, this is a very commonly shared belief. I wouldn't say argument. Commonly shared belief is that if you eating before a workout is going to cause sluggishness, too much fatigue. It doesn't sit well in the system. I would absolutely agree with that, depending on what you eat. So, if you are consuming, like eating before a workout, very similar to what I talked about with the very first question where somebody said like, it's just one cup of, or using the example of it's just one cup of coffee. And when I said it's just a scoop of pre-workout, eating before working out still is a very wide statement. So that could be, eating before a workout could be a piece of toast and a banana, 35 minutes before you hop in the car and leave the house, or before you leave work and go to the gym. Eating before a workout could be, I'm going to stop by an Italian restaurant and we're going to have like fettuccine Alfredo and big fat meal with a pH, and then I'm going to go work out. And I realize that those are two different extremes. And also I use the two different extremes on purpose. We're talking about two like very wide ends of the spectrum. So when it comes to the general advice that I would have in this particular instance, it would be, my strong recommendation is to, when it comes to strength training, I 100% would recommend that you have digested something, I would say about 30 to 40-ish minutes prior to training. And when I say something, I'm talking about something that's got, let's say, around like 30 to 35 grams of carbs, and maybe even you got a little bit of protein, but really the carbohydrates is the piece, so that you have some fuel in your system. Now, here's the piece that I think often gets missed. To me, it's not specifically about what you're eating right before you train. And I'll use the example because I'm just intimately connected with this, of training really early in the morning. So when I say really early, I can train anywhere from as early as sometimes about 4 o'clock in the morning, usually somewhere between the 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. range lately is where I've been. And do I eat before I go to the gym? Recently, no. Like over the last few months, I typically have not eaten at 3:30 or 4 or 4:15 in the morning before I go to the gym. Here's the thing though, what I have done is I typically have eaten a lot or a decent size meal before I've gone to bed the night before. So, sometimes I'm better than other times as far as keeping it about an hour or so before bed. However, I am typically consuming a good solid amount of calories. I'd say probably 600 calories plus 600 calories plus about an hour and a half or so ish before I go to bed. And so if I'm going to bed at a particular hour and then I'm up, and realistically, those of you who've listened to maybe recent episodes of either this podcast or the Lifting, Running, Living podcast that I do with Kelly, you'll know that my sleep window has been kind of shorter. So I'm averaging maybe in the 5 to 6 range right now, just based on level of responsibilities and tasks and things that I have. So I actually have, and I shared this a while back, I have started really looking at my last meal of the day being a contributor to what my performance is going to be the next morning. So I think that that's a part that is really super easy to miss in this entire conversation, where people are talking about, well, what should I eat before I go to the gym or not? Should I eat before I strength train? Should I eat before I do cardio? Like all this other stuff. And I'm speaking specifically to folks that do this early, that work out early in the morning, where the first thing that you're thinking of is, oh man, I don't know that I want to, I don't know if I feel like eating at 5 o'clock in the morning. Also keep in mind and take into account what you've got going on the night before. So if you are consuming like slower digesting carbs, especially ones that are fiber rich, prior to your bedtime, then that most likely is still working its way for many people. It's still working its way through your system. So it's not like all of a sudden that stuff, like those calories just are gone and they aren't going to be fuel because you went to sleep and then you woke up. So I do want to throw that out there too, when it comes to the conversation about whether or not somebody should eat before they strength train. I think that if you're like midday or evening, then I definitely think you should have some level of fuel in your system. Now, you want to play around with some different things, then sure, check it out. I just, I don't know, man. Like it's tough for me when I see that the advice is being given to go into strength training with little to no fuel. And also in the same breath, I want to remind folks who are listening to this that if you are somebody who is eating a solid dinner, a nutrient rich and calorie rich dinner, and then going to bed at a reasonable hour, and then you're getting up really early in the morning, that food from last night can also be fuel for the next morning's training session. So just something to keep in mind there. All right, and I've got the last one here. Let's see. It's been a beefy Q&A here. Let's see. So the last one, this one's going out to my other fellow coaches. So if you are not a coach, this may or you may not find this necessarily relatable. I'm going to just offer an opinion here. So this person posted, it says, I watched 4 personal trainers at my gym today. Here's what they were actually doing. And they listed, there's the therapist, there's the guy wearing 2 hoodies to hide the fact that there were maybe 10 more unfit people in the whole gym. There's the machine adjuster, and then there's the treadmill supervisor making sure you're running correctly. People love spending money, I guess, with a smiley face emoji. So I'll leave myself plenty of room to be wrong, as I sometimes can be, and often can be, straight up. However, these all come across as extremely judgmental, and I also understand how the social media game works. You do stuff like this so that you can gain engagement and or this is truly like your vibe, like this is your thing. And for what it's worth, I did put in the comments, can I offer you some feedback as a trainer? And I haven't gotten a response as of yet. This was yesterday, so it's been maybe about 24 hours. I have yet to get a response from the original poster if they would be open to this feedback. Here's the feedback that I would give. The first just overall one would be the energy that you put out will be a strong factor in the type of individual that you potentially work with. From what I can tell, I believe that this person is a trainer and a coach in some way, shape, or form. And if I remember correctly, when I looked at the thumbnail, like on their photo, like bro is jacked. Bro is definitely jacked, like looking good. So I say that to say, from what I can tell, I believe that this was posted by someone who is a coach, a trainer, a fitness mentor, and potentially is looking to have folks work with him, from what I can tell. So I say that to say, putting the energy out where my perception, and then I'm going to also do something that I don't usually recommend, and I'm going to do it anyway. My assumed perception, my assumption of what the perception of other folks would be, having being somebody who talks and interacts with a lot of different people and tries to understand like how they see things. So I don't put myself in their shoes. I try to put myself like in their head so that I can like see what they're seeing and how they're processing something. This for sure would come across to me. I'm assuming this would come across as super judgmental and very like almost like shaming type behavior. And the type of crowd that will typically attract, if that's the crowd that you're going for, then cool. It's typically going to attract the crowd who is also going to be judgmental and also going to base their level of how they see themselves on how much, air quotes, better they think they are and how much, air quotes, more fit than they believe they are than other people. So if that's what you want, if you want that sort of energy where the clients that you attract are going to base their level of effectiveness on the other people around them, then this nailed it. Like this absolutely nailed it. And the one piece from this list, like identifying the trainer who's the guy wearing 2 hoodies to hide the fact that there were maybe 10 more unfit people in the whole gym, which if I translate this correctly, it's saying that the personal trainer was trying to hide the fact that they were one of the least fit people in the gym. Just screams insecurity. And I'm not saying insecurity of the trainer, like the person you were watching. It actually screams insecurity of yourself, because it's just very, I mean, that's a very interesting observation to take the time to post on a social media platform. So again, like the advice that I would just give is that the client that you're going to attract is someone who is primarily going to focus specifically on aesthetics and assumptions. So they're going to put those 2 things together. So even if you have a very solid program that actually focuses on working from what I consider solid, working from like the inside out and working like growth mindset and also like ownership and individual responsibility, and also then responsibility for others and things like that. At the end of the day, the people that you're going to attract are going to be the people who are going to judge other people the way that you are judging personal trainers. And I'm just going to leave it at that. All right, there we go. Let's wrap this up. If you have listened to this all the way through, I truly appreciate you. Big time. So this has been a Q&A or just a, little fitness soapbox episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. If you appreciate this episode, think it would impact, if it's impacted you and you think it potentially would impact someone else in hopefully a positive way, then I would like to ask you personally if you would pass this episode on to someone else. If you have comments, concerns, questions, feedback, anything you want to throw my way, reach out to me. I am on Instagram at Coach JK McLeod. That is MCLEOD. You can also email me if social media is not your thing, jk@jkmcleod.com. Again, McLeod is spelled MCLEOD. Also, I mentioned very briefly in the episode, however, it's really kind of a big deal, that starting February 27th, I will be opening enrollment for access to a training app or a training program that I'll be hosting on Train Heroic. The initial training program will be a 6-week program, really focused on either doing a 3-day total body split or a 4-day upper lower split, where we are focused on strength and physique, all things hypertrophy, really just focused on the things that really matter. So it is a training program that I've actually been doing for 7 years, I want to say, with the folks who are over at POP, Peak Optimization Performance. So shout out if you happen to be somebody who's in the POP solar system. However, with the transition and ownership with POP, then I am moving to do my own thing and release the program that for 7 years, hundreds, like literally, actually, we're probably in the thousands at this point, just because there's been some churn and things like that over a 7-year period. You know, you don't necessarily have the same people all the time. However, a program that thousands of people have utilized on and off for, again, the better part of 7 to has it been 8 years? Might even be 8 years at this point. I can't even remember. I think it's been 8 years actually. So if you are interested in being able to gain access to that particular program, it's through a monthly subscription, very reasonably priced, then reach out to me, shoot me a message, and I will make sure that I get information over to you when enrollment opens on February 27th. And then we launch our first 6-week training cycle the following Monday. I don't have the date in front of me, but yeah, that's what we've got going on. All right. So thank you again so much for listening to this fitness and nutrition and wellness and all things focused episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I appreciate you. Take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you next time.